Welcome to New York Got Game.
Welcome back to another edition of New York Got Game. Another busy week of New York basketball with the Knicks. They got bounced from the in-season tournament by the Bucks last week, and then they got dumped by the Celtics in Beantown on Friday night. Right now, Knickerbockers, they're having their issues against elite teams and teams with winning records. But today, we're going to talk all about the Brooklyn Nets, who've won 3 straight games heading into a West Coast trip that begins Monday night in Sacramento. It's all Brooklyn basketball on this episode. We've got a great guest to talk about it. So, let's do it.
The Nets are on fire.
The Brooklyn Nets, they've had an average start to the season as they are a squad that's been around 500 this season. But now they're free of the drama that surrounded them the past few years, and they're rebuilding while being competitive. So let's talk some Nets hoops with a man who is a writer for Nets Daily and the Nets Republic, Brian Fleurantin. Brian, how you doing, man?
What's up? What's up? Glad to be here. Excited to be here. Feeling good.
Man, I'm excited to have you here. And I want to let the people know, before we started this, Brian and I were talking, and I found out we are both alums of the same high school, Clara Barton High School in Brooklyn, New York. We're both Clara Barton Panthers, man. So I'm pleasure to have, you're the second Clara Barton Panther to sit here at this desk, but the first to be on the show.
Ooh, look at that.
So
look at that.
I appreciate that. But listen, I also want to give you your flowers, too, because you've been doing a great job covering the Nets for Nets Daily. I am a Nets Daily alum. Used to do some video work for them back in the day. Our times sort of overlapped there. That's how we know each other. But you've been doing a great job. So when it came to talking Nets, I said, I got to have Brian up here to talk some Nets. So we got to do that.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Glad to have you here. Brian, let's start with this, because this has been a different season for the Nets, right? There's not the drama that we've seen the past couple of years. And I spoke to some Nets season ticket holders this past summer who shared with me they were disappointed with how things went down during the KD and the Kyrie era.
Yeah.
Now, we know those guys are gone. So I got to ask you this. What's the vibe of the fan base been this season? And then also, what's the energy been like in Barclays Center right now, knowing that there's a much different energy and vibe around this team?
Yeah, I would say the energy around it, I guess in the fan base, is less tense, if that makes sense. Because I felt like really the past 2 years, it was very much, it was like a stormy cloud just hanging over everything around the team. We had situations where we're like, why am I talking about city politics with my basketball team? I don't want to do that. I want to talk about basketball. So we had a lot of situations where it was just a drama, who's in, who's out, bad injuries at the worst possible time, right when the team is really starting to peak with KD a couple times, and just really so much sort of static and negative energy in that way. And I think that now with the fan base, they still demand excellence, which is consistent from even way back in the last days in New Jersey to early days in Brooklyn now. There's still a demand for excellence and good play from the team, but there isn't much of a toxicity, for lack of a better term. Like, it's not as vitriolic as it had been in the last days of the previous era and really the worst days of that era. So now it's more of a situation where, okay, we're here to hoop, we're here to have fun. It's more positive in that way. And I would say for the energy in the building, I think it's been better. Like we I do Liberty stuff too.
Yeah.
A big point of contention was there was a pundit on TV who was like, "Oh, the energy in Barclays Center is awful. Ain't nothing going on in there." But it was in the context of Liberty, and it's like, no, that crowd is awesome. They turn up. So it feels like it's been a situation where I think for Nets fans in the building, like, you want to really bring that energy, because in the summertime we saw that building rock at peak capacity. Like, we've both been in.
Yeah, we've seen it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's a situation where it's like, okay, you really want to really get into the game and really have that fun. So I think for fans there, and the team's been winning at home in particular, so it's like you really want to match the energy on the court and really keep that up and really make Barclays a really even more of a place to be.
Yeah, and it seems like there's players on the team that I think fans can get behind. I love that you mentioned the Liberty stuff, too, because the building was rocking for the Liberty this summer, and I think the Nets are trying to get there, which is good to know that the vibes are, as you said, more positive and less toxic around this team going forward. But I want to ask you about where the team is right now, Brian, right? Because they're 12-9. Yeah. So you look at that, and it's interesting where people had the Nets pegged heading into the season. But what do you make of this Brooklyn squad through 21 games?
I would say I've been fairly impressed, to be honest. I think coming into the year, I had them pegged as like a solid playing team, and I still hold them there. But it feels like they're really starting to sort of turn things around in a better way. Like, the offense is really crisp. I think over the past 8 games, I think at last I checked, they were like second in offensive rating in the entire NBA, which is really surprising when you consider that they don't have they don't have the top tier superstar player. They have really good players. So having an offense that can be as good as they have been is really impressive in that regard. And I think a lot of that comes from Mikal Bridges. I think in particular, he's the person that I think we look at and say, okay, you're the top guy here, and you have to be the person to really step up and be that leader in that way. And I really pinpoint the last 8 games in particular because the game they played against the Sixers, they were non-competitive after halftime. And Mikal only took 1 shot after half. And I wrote in the next statement and say, like, that's unacceptable. Like, you're the best player. You cannot go an entire half taking only one field goal attempt. And over the stretch, he's really been aggressive and assertive, like 6 free throws a night, shooting like 50% from the field, like 50% from 3, playing really well and carrying the offense in that way and being someone who can take over late in games. So I think having Mikal as that leader and that guiding light for the rest of the team has really been impressive. And I think with how he's played, it really sort of like allows other players to sort of like get more comfortable. Cam Johnson stepping up, Spencer Dinwiddie's able to take over in clutch when need be. So I think having Mikal as the lead man has really sort of like given a direction to the team. Be like, okay, he's the guy we turn to when we need something going, and then the rest of us can play off of that.
Yeah, and the thing with him that I've been able to watch and sort of give time to, right? This is his first time being the number 1 option, being that guy, and he's such a good two-way player that I think is encouraging for the Nets. And when you look forward, and we'll get to this a little later about how they build around him and what they do, but the signs have been encouraging, particularly like you said, when he had the bad game against the Sixers, but then you've seen how he's responded and had some really strong games with the ball in his hands. I got to ask you this question, because every time somebody comes up to me and they talk about the Nets, they're like, what's up with Ben Simmons? Right? We got to ask what's up with Ben Simmons. Brian, are we ever going to see him consistently on the court again? And do you think his constant injuries are hurting the development of his team? Because there's a lot of talk about what could they be if Ben Simmons was on the floor? Will he get back to his all-star self? So do you think him just not being there, is that hurting the team and the ceiling of where they could be at least in this season?
Yeah, I would say with him it's kind of hazy, where it's like you really can't. I don't think we can really expect him to be 2018 all-star. You can be 1B in a franchise. I don't think we can get that from him anymore, to be completely honest with you. I think the amount of injuries he's had, and back injuries are so tricky to predict. You know, our guy, Brook Lopez, he had his back injury, but then he came out on the other side looking incredible. But sometimes it's different depending on who it is, and especially for a player like Ben who plays downhill and physically in the way that he does. If your back is down 100%, then nothing else is really there. And I think what also happened, and I think it was something we noticed too, is that he would drive to the basket, but he wouldn't drive into contact. So it's like you drive, but then you're fading back. So you're making shots at the rim more difficult for yourself. So I think for him in particular, it's a situation for the Nets where I think it's almost like found money, where it's like, oh, I found $20 in my wallet. That's great. But if it's not there, it's like, oh, I just go about my business. So I think you have to treat Ben in that way, where it's like, if he can give me something, fantastic, but I can't be like, oh, Ben is going to be running the offense, doing all these things. I can't expect 28, 30 minutes out of him every night when it comes to that. Like, if he does give something, that's great, but I'm not going to be like, okay, if Ben comes back, we're really going to like get to 5th in the standings. I don't think I can put that on him, and I don't think anybody can expect that from him at this point.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit unrealistic to expect considering what we've seen from him. But if he can help, well, at least the defense, rebounding, maybe some playmaking, that could be a plus for the Nets. Another player I wanted to talk to you about, Cameron Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Cam Thomas. Like, look, we know this to keep it 100. He's been getting buckets this season. We all knew he was a bucket getter. We knew that he can score. But now, leading the teams in points per game, I think the thing when I look at him, the question I have is, what's the next level for him in terms of his development in the NBA game? What can Cam do to become a better player? Because he's looking like he should start, could be a starter consistently for this team, and he's going to get buckets. But where do you think the next level is for Cam Thomas?
Something with Cam that's interesting was that he did a feature story with, I think, Jake Wolf of GQ a couple of days ago, and he mentioned that the coaching staff has really appreciated the way he's been playing on defense. They've noticed the effort he gives on that side, And I think for him, that's the big goal. I don't think we can expect him to be like, first team all defense kind of player, but if you're someone who can execute within the scheme, stick to the principles, just be solid in that regard, because you have other players who can cover that, who can pick up for you and cover for you in that way, especially a big in Claxton down low who's fantastic. So if you just stay within the principles and sort of stick to the plan in that way, you'll be fine. And I think what also impresses me about him is that he's someone that can bounce back after a really bad game. Like, he had a rough game 2 games ago, but he came back out still aggressive, still assertive, not really sort of getting down on himself. And I think for a young player, especially someone who had been, like, if he made a mistake last year, he's on the bench, he ain't getting back in. Now you have that freedom to just really play and then know that if you make a mistake, it's not going to be the end of the game for you. Like, just to give a little peek behind the curtain, like, you were talking with J-Mac beforehand about Quentin Grimes and the Knicks, and I think he mentioned something really interesting where he's like, oh, if I make a mistake, I'm out the game, I ain't getting back in. Now, in a situation where his confidence is really, from the outside looking in, it looks like it's been damaged and shattered as a result. So I think for a young player, especially, like, you got to give him room, like, give him that chance to really grow, make mistakes in the court, learn on the fly, and learn in clutch situations. And I think the team has done that with Cam this year. And I think especially you really want to make sure that you want to encourage him to stay assertive and just do what he does. And I think the team has done better of that as compared to previous years.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point that you bring up there, right, in terms of when you have a young player, being able to make sure you see that confidence grow. Instilling the confidence in certain situations, okay, it might not be rocking for you, working for you on this side of the ball, but we believe in you. We believe in you working in the scheme, and you see that going on with Cam Thomas. So I think that's a very good sign for Nets fans. We're talking about defense, though, okay? The defense on this Nets team, it's been below average this season, right? I would think you would say they need to improve on that side of the ball if they're going to be a team that competes for the playoffs, the top 6 spot in the East. Do you agree with that statement? Do they need to improve more on that side of the ball to be able to, because you had them as a playing team, but if they want to get to a top 6 in the East, which is in striking distance for them right now, how much more do they need to improve on that side of the ball?
Yeah, one thing about the Nets, I think JV mentioned it a while back, is that they don't force any turnovers at all. Like, on the season, they're dead last in forcing opponents' turnovers. And for a team that wants to get out in transition and get those easy buckets and really get the crowd at home, especially rocking and rolling with them, you got to be able to force turnovers. You got to be able to cash in on those opportunities. Since that Sixer game, they've gotten better at it, but still only 24th in terms of forcing turnovers. So they got to get a lot better at that. They got to really be able to, like, get in those passing lanes, really create havoc in that way. And I think that will help them get back in. Coming into the year, one thing with the Nets was that they really changed their defensive scheme. So they were playing more of a drop coverage. So that way, opposing guards could walk into those jumpers because they're like, oh, we want to wall off the rim, make sure no baskets at the cup. Like, and that really opened up trouble in that way. And over the past 8 games since that Sixer loss, they've been, I think, tied for 5th with Oklahoma City in terms of defensive rating. So the defense is starting to get better, but there's still so many other avenues where they can improve. And I think that starts with forcing more turnovers.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a team that wants to push the ball, that wants to get out. We've seen that with the Nets. They've got the athletes, also got some shooters. Forcing all turnovers could lead to better offense. Sometimes defense is your best offense.
Yep.
You wonder if you can see that with the Nets. You mentioned JV, Jacque Vaughn, head coach. I personally think, Brian, you got to give him credit for the job that he's done since taking over for Steve Nash, right? And it hasn't been easy because he had a lot of rapid roster changes. At one point, he was dealing with some superstar players. Then he was not. When you look at him and what he's done, is he the right man in your eyes to lead Brooklyn back into contention for a title?
I think so. I think what helps a lot, I think we sometimes sort of like underrated in the NBA is that we don't really appreciate coaching consistency. Like, I was looking it up last night before we came on, like Michael Malone, like, we see where Denver is now, but when he got there after he got fired from Sacramento, Denver was in the dumps. And it took a long time to really get them back to where they were. And then we saw players like Murray, Jokic, all those guys really get comfortable and grow with him together. So I think it's a situation where I think you really want to have that consistency in the head coaching spot, because you want to make sure that, okay, if I know coming into season, this is what we're working on, this is what we're building on. We have that consistency, and we're really able to sort of like chart and grow over time. I think a lot, especially for a franchise like the Nets that has been in so much upheaval since 2019 with the players firing Kenny Atkinson, having JV as the interim, and then bringing Steve in, then getting rid of Steve, back to JV, that kind of thing. It's a lot of It's a lot of instability in a lot of certain ways. So I think especially for the franchise now, you want to get in the spot where it's like, okay, we know what we're doing. We have a vision of what we want to do. We need people who are going to be here long term, and we're not going to just rush to make the back page, rush to just get the biggest name possible, rush to do this thing here. And I think that starts with the head coach. And I think also with JV, one thing I've noticed about him, earlier this year, I covered an event that Jacque Vaughn, Cam Johnson, Jonquel Jones did where they announced a public school free basketball clinic in Brooklyn. And one thing I noticed with JP is that he's very engaging. Like he's very, like you talk with him, it's like, wow, he'll really give you great answers. He'll really be comfortable with you. He'll really be in the moment with you. And I think having a coach who can really be that community presence as well too, I think really sort of builds not just success on the court, but success off the court. You know that, okay, Jacque is going to be there. Jacque is really going to represent the team and city with pride and a gracefulness. And I think that matters a lot, especially when you want to really put yourself in a position to be one of the marquee franchises in the league.
Yeah, he's done that. You've heard about how he's embraced Brooklyn, right? We're both Brooklynites. We've heard how he's embraced Brooklyn. I think that goes a long way into the fan base seeing that, towards the team seeing that. I think that's a really good point there. And I also thought you made up another good point about consistency.
Yeah.
Way too often in sports, whether it's the NBA and the other leagues, we want the quick fix. We want to go from 0 to 100. It doesn't work like that all the time, fans. But I think bringing up Denver, Mike Malone, is a good point. It takes time. And, hey, a couple of years ago, some people wanted him out of there in Denver, and then they won a championship. Now, look, it helps to have an MVP in Nikola Jokic. We're not saying it doesn't.
If Jokic wants to come to Brooklyn, I mean, hey, I can make an exception for my roster consistency. Be like, hey, come on down, big guy.
Look, I like the recruiting already. I like that. I'm sure Brooklyn would love Nikola Jokic. I got to ask you this, because you said at the top that when you looked at this Nets team at the start of this season, you said, okay, I got them pegged as a playing team. But they're kind of teetering around there on a 6-7 spot right now, 12-9, as you mentioned before. Yeah. How good do you think this team can be this season? Is there another level? Do you think they can get to that top 6 in the East?
I think a lot of that is dependent on, I guess, how the rest of the bracket shapes up, because I didn't really envision Orlando being as good as they have been. Like, I think they're currently like second or third in the Eastern Conference right now. I'm like, good God, they're amazing. Even though the Nets have been their kryptonite. They've won both games by convincing margins. So teams like that have really impressed me. I think they can sneak up to 6, because I think especially if you look around the rest of the East, Miami in the regular season is always like hit or miss. Like you never know if they're really pushing to get to a higher spot, or just being like, okay, we get in, we make sure we get into the playoffs, and then we just sort of figure out the rest of the road from there. So I think that might be an opportunity to creep up to the sixth spot and maybe higher. I think what will help this team, as far as like learning and understanding more about themselves, is the upcoming road trip. They've got 5 games starting on Monday night: Sacramento, a tough back-to-back Phoenix, Denver, then Golden State Saturday night, and then wrap up with Utah. So I think that stretch in particular is going to be really instructive for how we look at this team and how they really sort of like see where they go into January, the deadline, and the rest of the season. So if they're able to really sort of put on a good show, really acquit themselves well in tough environments, especially Denver on night 2 for back-to-back, with a team that's really been struggling and it's really going to be fired up to get a win back on their plate. I think if they're able to do that, if the Nets are able to really sort of like play well and really build good habits in that road trip, I think it'll be a really good sign for the rest of the season for them.
Yeah, it would be. They got a chance. They definitely have a chance to get to one of those top 6 spots in the Eastern Conference. Last thing for me here, Brian, before we let you go, because the Nets are where they are. There's going to be a lot of talk about the future. They're still rebuilding or retooling, depends how you want to characterize that. There's talk about the team eventually adding a star. We've seen how stars have gone for the Nets before. What moves do you think Brooklyn needs to make either this season or beyond if they're going to return to the top of the league, where we're talking about them contending for an NBA title again? What are some moves you would like to see them make? You don't have to give me specific names, but maybe the kinds of players you'd like to see here in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I think to think of the Nets, I'm going to steal a phrase from Jonathan Kolb, the GM of the Liberty, and say this is a hybrid rebuild, where it's like, oh, we're not completely stripping this down to bare parts, so we're hanging around, we're laying down the foundation, and then if the big move is there, we got what we need, we ready to roll right now. So I think this is where the team is as well. I think that's where the Nets are going as well too. They've got all those bevy of picks from Phoenix coming in. Phoenix injury racked. So there may be opportunity to really cash out in that way. They got picks from Dallas coming in. Dallas last night, their guy suffered what looks like a really bad injury. We hope he's okay. So it's a situation where they have party pieces to play with, and they'll have money coming in as far as like cap room and things like that. I would say one thing I want for the Nets is like a really great point guard. Like I think if there's an opportunity to sort of upgrade on the position, even though Spencer's been really rock solid, if there's an opportunity to get someone a little bit better or someone who has like a higher ceiling, I think that would really sort of like get them to where they need to go. And I think also retaining the Claxton. I think he is such a foundational piece, and I think his growth and improvement from when he was first drafted in 2019 and really getting to where he is now, I think for Claxton in particular, him being more confident at the free throw line, because I remember back in, I think it was Game 4 against Boston in 2022, he missed like damn near every free throw match.
Yeah.
And now I think a moment like that can be so shattering for a young player's confidence. But I think for Clark, since then, he's maintained that energy, he's maintained that fearlessness, he's maintained that aggression, and he's confident. And I think keeping him here, because he's a free agent in the summer, I think making sure he stays here is the job one for this team. Like keep him here, make sure he's really a key part of your future, because he's still like 24. He's young, but way younger than me. So I'm like, hey, keep him here. Make sure that he's a foundational part of this future, because he's only getting better by the day. And a Clax McCall tag team as sort of like the lead faces of the Nets is a really good starting point. And then I think you can sort of like work the margins from there. Cam Thomas is getting better and better. The bench, like I think Sean Marks doesn't get enough credit for being able to find good talent on the margins. Players like Lonnie Walker IV and Dennis Smith Jr., even though they're injured now, they've won games for this team. Trenton Watford was huge in that first win against Miami. So the Nets have shown that they're able to get talent at the margins and sort of like find players who can fit the roles that are needed of them. And now it's just a matter of we have some of the lead foundational pieces with McCall and Clarks. How can we sort of find that next person who can really sort of take us to the finish line? Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see what the Nets do going this summer and beyond. I think you're right. Priority number one should be to bring back Nick Claxton, who's one of the best young centers in the league. Very good defensively. Offense has improved as well, too. So we'll see what they do. Listen, Nets are 12-9 right now. Mm-hmm. As the time we're doing this recording, you said they're heading into a very big week coming up. We will see how they do. I think they're in a fantastic spot, and they're playing hard. The future seems bright in Brooklyn after, some, I don't want to call it dark days, guys, but
it was kind of hazy.
Kind of hazy. You said that. That was the word used. Hazy, a little bit of toxicity in there, too, that I don't think the fan base liked, but I think the future is bright for the Nets fans. And look, future is bright for you, my Barton brother. I'm glad with all the work you're doing with Nets Daily, Nets Republic. Please check out the work of Brian Fleurantin. He does a fantastic job, one of the really good writers around the Nets. Also does some good stuff covering the Liberty. We're going to have you back for that as well, too.
Absolutely.
So this will not be your first time or last time. This is your first time, but it will not be your last time on New York Got Game. Brian, I appreciate you coming through, my man.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, and anytime.
We'll do it again. That is Brian Fleurantin. Check his work out. All right, thank you for watching this episode of New York Got Game. Special thanks to my guest, Brian Fleurantin. Also, much love to my editor, Antonio Oliveras Nicole, producer Lee Insler, and director Brianna Mutsing-Jacque. We got to bounce, but we'll see you next time on New York Got Game.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.